Hey y'all, this is Barack Flash, and this is going to be my part two to The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. It's one of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes, and I thought it'd be pretty cool to sort of make a part two with a continuation to it. I hope everyone enjoys it. And again, this is my first time, so go easy on me.
Then I take it this place, this Maple Street, is not unique.
By no means. Their world is full of Maple Streets. And we'll go from one to the other and let them destroy themselves. One to the other. One to the other. One to the other.
In the quiet town of Acer, a sense of unease had begun to settle. Strange occurrences had been disturbing the peace, and the residents were growing fearful. The town's mayor, Sarah Perry, had been up late one night, unable to sleep. From the balcony of her mansion, she saw something strange in the distance. Lights were flickering, and then they went out. She thought she saw something or saw one, but she couldn't be sure. She blamed it on the lack of sleep and the glass of red wine she had before bed. But the image stayed with her, nagging at the back of her head. A couple of weeks later, the town had been having subtle issues. A hearing aid here, a radio there. Nothing too crazy, but odd all the same. Sarah was at the newsstand one day, looking at the front page of a tabloid. The headline read, "Another city erupts in chaos. If you didn't believe in aliens before, you should start." She was lost in thought when a voice from behind her said, "I hope you don't believe in that." She turned around to see a man she didn't recognize. "I gather you only trust information from the mainstream media?" she asked, her tone carrying a hint of skepticism. Sarah had noticed a change in the town folks over the past few weeks. Conversations had become hushed whispers. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion, and there was a palpable tension in the air. They have the means to verify their stories before they go to print. They have a reputation to consider. Why would they report lies? Like here, you see that article you're looking at? Where's it at? He asked. "Grooveland, Idaho," Sarah replied. "Oh, right, over in Blackfoot territory. Let's see. Pops, pass me a gazette," the man said to the owner of the newsstand. He handed him a coin and received the gazette in return. "Let's see here. Ah, here it is. Says here there was nothing more than some faulty generators running in that town. And the alien rumors was nothing but some old high schoolers playing pranks on the town folks." "I apologize, but I don't believe we've met. Are you new to Acer?" she inquired, her gaze steady and assessing. "Name's Tom," he replied with a grin. "Just moved in a couple of weeks ago in one of the houses. Only chatted with a few folks around here. Folks seems friendly." "You're Sarah Perry, right? The mayor," he replied. "Indeed I am," she confirmed, offering her hand in a firm handshake. As he returned the gesture with a smirk, she studied him, a sense of unease creeping into her thoughts. A few days later, Sarah called for a town hall meeting to address their growing concerns. Residents of Acer gathered anxiously, eager to discuss the escalating issues. Sarah, the mayor, stood at the front of the room, her expressions determined. The hall buzzed with whispers and murmurs, anticipation filling the air. As Sarah took the podium, she scanned the crowd, her piercing blue eyes meeting the gaze of Officer Daniels, who stood stoically by the door. Mrs. Connie Henderson, the town's nurse, sat in the front row, her warm smile offering a sense of support. Jenny, a young resident, scribbling in her notebook, her eyes filled with fascination. Mr. Thompson, a wealthy businessman, occupied a seat at the back, his arms crossed in a display of indifference. Dr. Lewis, the local dentist, engaged in a lively discussion with a group of residents, his animated gestures punctuating his words. Sarah cleared her throat, commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I acknowledge your concerns, the power outages, the unexplained noises at night, the erratic behavior of our streetlights. I assure you, we are thoroughly investigating these incidents. A voice from the crowd piped up. I've seen strange lights in the sky at night, and my radio's been acting up. I think there's something more to this. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the hall, and fear with evidence in the eyes of townfolks. Her voice resonated with authority as she continued. I am convinced that these incidents are not mere coincidence. There is something else at play here, something we cannot ignore. Her words hung in the air, capturing the attention of the crowd. Whispers of disbelief and skepticism circulated. But Sarah remained undeterred. We must unite in our efforts to uncover the truth and safeguard our town, she declared, her voice resolute. I assure you, as your mayor, I am committed to finding answers and ensuring the safety of our community. Sarah's voice echoed through the room, her words resonating with determination. The crowd began to stir, questions bubbling up from concerned residents. Sarah raised her hand, signaling for silence. I understand you have questions, and I'm here to address them, she said, her gaze sweeping across the room. Please raise your hand, and I will do my best to answer. Mr. Thompson, the wealthy businessman, stood up first. Mayor Perry, what assurance can you provide that our town's infrastructure isn't properly maintained? These power outages and flickering lights are unacceptable. Sarah met his gaze, unwavering expression conveying confidence. Mr. Thompson, I assure you the maintenance of our town's infrastructure is of utmost importance. We have a dedicated team working diligently to investigate and rectify these issues. I want to reassure you that we are taking every necessary measures to ensure the safety and reliability of our infrastructure. Jenny, a bright and curious teenager, raised her hand. Mayor Perry, what do you make of these rumors about aliens being responsible for these strange occurrences? Sarah's eyes flickered for a moment. Knowing the delicate nature of the subject, she exchanged a glance with Tom, the tentative newcomer. Jenny, your question is valid. As mayor, it is my duty to consider all possibilities and leave no stone unturned in our investigation. While I cannot make any definitive claims at this juncture, it is critical to approach this situation with an open mind. Our primary function is on gathering concrete evidence and facts and unravel the truth by these occurrences. Tom also raised his hand, catching Sarah's attention. She nodded towards Tom, inviting him to speak. I'd just like to add a bit of perspective to this discussion. Tom began, his voice steady and composed. My family once lived on Maple Street. Yes, that Maple Street, he said, causing a subtle audible gasp to ripple through the room. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, her attention fully captured. She leaned in, eager to hear what Tom had to say. I was just a kid back then, Tom continued, glancing at Jenny, who was listening intently. I remember the town buzzing with rumors of aliens. They consumed everyone's thoughts. I read comic books about extraterrestrials beings and imagined all sorts of scenarios. But in the end, it wasn't aliens. It was just poor infrastructure and some sunspots causing the strange occurrences. He paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in. My family moved shortly after that, seeking a fresh start. Sarah's gaze locked with Tom, a mixture of curiosity and intrigue in her eyes. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. You were there? You experienced it firsthand? Tom met her gaze, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Yes, Mayor. I witnessed the chaos and the tragic consequences of a town's belief in aliens. It's a memory that has stayed with me. The room fell into a momentary silence as the weight of Tom's words hung in the air. Sarah's mind raced with questions and a newfound sense of connection with this mysterious newcomer. As the meeting began to disperse, Sarah overheard hushed whispers. "I heard it's aliens," one woman said. "No, it's the government," another man argued. Fear and suspicion was spreading like wildfire. After the town hall meeting, Sarah engaged in a brief conversation with Miss Connie Henderson, offering a word of gratitude and support as they walked out of the town hall. Sarah suggested they grab a bite to eat at a local diner to discuss the recent events further. Seated in the booth at the diner, Sarah and Mrs. Henderson sipping their coffees, contemplating the discussion that occurred at the town hall meeting. Suddenly, Tom entered the diner, his eyes scanning the room until he spots Sarah and Mrs. Henderson. He made his way over to their booth, a friendly smile on his face. "Mind if I join you, ladies?" Tom asked, gesturing to the empty seat. Sarah looked up, a mix of surprise and curiosity in her eyes. "Certainly, Tom. Please have a seat." Tom settled into the booth, his presence causing a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Mrs. Henderson observed him with a hint of skepticism. Her instincts tell her there's something different about this one. Tom leaned in forward, his eyes meeting Sarah. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation at the town hall. Mayor, do you really believe in little green men?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, her voice firm. "I prefer to keep an open mind, Tom. There have been strange occurrences in our town. It's my duty to consider all possibilities. However, I also understand the importance of relying on evidence and facts." Mrs. Henderson chimed in, her tone cautious. "While I don't particularly believe in little green men, Mayor Perry has always shown a commitment to seeking the truth and serving our community with integrity." Tom nodded, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. "I admire your dedication, Mayor Perry. It takes a strong leader to navigate through uncertainties and maintain the trust of the community. But let's not forget the lessons of history. Sometimes what we perceive as outwardly can be explained by more earthly matters." Their conversation was interrupted by Officer Daniels, who approached the booth. "Mayor Perry, sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to let you know that there have been reports of another incident in town. The flickering of the street lights and a power outage near the marketplace." Sarah sighed, a mixture of frustration and determination on her face. "Thank you, Officer Daniel. I'll look into it personally." Officer Daniel had been patrolling the town more frequently since the strange occurrences began. "I've been keeping an eye on things, Mayor," he reported. "I've noticed Mr. Baxter at the scene a few times, but nothing concrete. I'll keep looking." She excused herself from the booth, leaving Tom and Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Henderson chuckled softly, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You seem to have your eyes on the mayor, Tom. Got a thing for her or something? Don't worry, I won't tell." Tom's smile widened, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I assure you, Mrs. Henderson, my interest lies in observing human nature. The mayor's leadership and beliefs make her an intriguing subject, that's all." Mrs. Henderson nods. "Well, the mayor is certainly an intriguing subject for observation. She's always been dedicated to serving this town." Just then, Mrs. Henderson excuses herself from the booth, her expressions filled with concern. "I should check on the folks at the hospital, just in case there's any issues. I should also stop by and see if Mr. and Mrs. Davis are okay." Tom nodded in understanding as Mrs. Henderson leaves the diner. With the two of them alone, Tom turned his attention to Officer Daniels, who had taken a seat at the counter. "Officer Daniel," Tom began, his voice casual, yet filled with curiosity. "May I ask you a question? Does the mayor truly believe in aliens?" Officer Daniel paused, his gaze thoughtful. "The mayor's father was a police officer, and he died tragically in a bridge collapse years ago. The town was rife with rumors of aliens being responsible. Some folks became obsessed with chasing these aliens, spending time near that highway cafe near the area. But As someone who always led with facts and evidence, I can tell you that the collapse was caused by faulty infrastructure, and no one should have been on that bridge that night. Tom absorbs the information, his mind spinning with the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Thank you for sharing, Officer Daniels. It's interesting how beliefs can shape our perspective on reality. Officer Daniels nodded back, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Indeed it is. And it seems the mayor's belief may have been influenced by the events of that tragic night. As Tom and the Officer Daniel continued their conversation, the mystery of Acer deepened, leaving a trail of questions and uncertainty that would unfold in the days to come. In the next morning, Sarah stopped by the newsstand before heading into the office. One of the tabloids caught her eye, an article about a series of mysterious bridge collapse. As she reads, a chill ran down her spine. The article didn't mention aliens, but it didn't need to. Sarah remembered what happened to her father and the rumors that followed the tragedy. Shaking off the memory, she purchased the paper and headed to the office. However, as she walked, an uneasy feeling lingered. They had just begun, and it already felt like it was going to be another long one. Late that evening, a sudden electrical surge jolted through Acer's downtown area, causing power outages and flickering streetlights again. Officer Daniel, receiving reports of disturbance, rushed to investigate. As he arrived at the scene, he noticed Mr. Baxter hastily working through, trying to rectify the situation. But his attention was unexpectedly drawn to a figure in the distance. A fleeting thought crossed Officer Daniel's mind. Could it be Tom? No, it couldn't be. Yet, something felt off. Officer Daniel questioned Mr. Baxter about the situation, and Mr. Baxter explained his attempts to investigate the source of the surge and restore power. At that moment, Mr. Thompson, who had happened to be walking nearby, approached Officer Daniels. He recounted hearing the noise just before the surge and expressed his frustration about the financial impact it had on him. With his suspicion growing, Officer Daniels decided to report the incident to Sarah, sharing his observation about the figure without mentioning his fleeting thoughts of it resembling Tom. He acknowledged he had lack of information and began to question if the situation was affecting his judgment. In the following days, the strange occurrences continued to disrupt the peaceful town of Acer. One evening, during a movie night at the local theater owned by Mr. Thompson, the unexpected happened. The theater was filled with exciting moviegoers, eagerly awaiting for the film to begin. However, as the movie was about to start, the entire theater was plunged into darkness. Panic ensued and screams filled the air, leaving everyone in pitch black darkness as the projector suddenly shut off. Amidst the confusion and murmur of disappointment, Officer Daniel swiftly arrived at the scene. He surveyed the theater, witnessing the fear-stricken expressions of the moviegoers. The elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, exchanged a worried glance, while Mrs. Henderson, known for her level-headedness, tried to calm everyone else, including Jenny and Emily, who were visibly shaken by the incident. Approaching the group, Officer Daniel offered reassurance and asked for any observations that might have had. Jenny, her voice trembling, shared her accounts of seeing Mr. Baxter near the electrical room before the blackout, describing his strange behavior as he was talking to himself. Emily, the theater employee, nodded in agreement. Recognizing the significance of this development, Officer Daniel realized he had to report this to Sarah promptly. However, to his surprise, the phone lines were down, leaving him no choice but to make the journey to Sarah's home. Late into the night, Officer Daniels arrives at Sarah's doorstep, his expression serious and determined. He relayed the details of the theater incident, emphasizing that the presence of Mr. Baxter near the electrical room and an unease it caused among the witnesses. Sarah listened attentively, her mind racing with possibilities and implications. With the theater incident and the new information in mind, Sarah and Officer Daniel understood something was happening in Acer. The next day, Sarah, in an attempt to restore some form of normality to Acer, decided that a festival to celebrate the start of the summer would do the trick. As the townspeople enjoyed the festivities, laughter filled the air, momentarily creating the illusion that the town was back to its joyful state. However, Sarah's mind was consumed by her growing suspicion. Each time a new incident occurred, she couldn't shake the belief that it was alien in nature, only to discover it wasn't. Yet, none of it made sense. Sarah was confident that there was no infrastructure issues in Acer. She had made sure of that, and her past experience had taught her to be thorough. But something was pulling at her, taunting her. Something had to be behind the chaos. She was sure of that too. The papers hinted at the existence of external forces causing these disturbances. Tom? Mr. Thompson? She questioned, observing them in the distance. Mr. Thompson always had an air of superiority, as if he believed he can do a better job. Dr. Lewis? He may be eccentric, but surely he couldn't be an alien, right? But isn't it always the one you least expect? Connie? No, not sweet Connie. It couldn't be her. People were beginning to question Sarah's credibility, and she couldn't help but doubt herself as well. Amidst shaking hands and greeting people, Sarah's thoughts continued to wander, consumed by the rumors circulating about Mr. Baxter's odd behavior prior to each incident. Perhaps he was the one responsible, disguised as one of us, the person entrusted with making sure everything works. She continued to get lost in her thought. As twilight approached, casting an ethereal glow over the town, the lights began to flicker. Then suddenly, a lamppost exploded, sending shockwaves through the crowd. Panic assumed as darkness enveloped the town, only for the lights to flicker back on moments later. The radios played on and off intermittently, adding to the chaos. Sarah's eyes darting back and forth, then directly towards Mr. Baxter in the distance, observing him standing motionlessly, seemingly engaged in a conversation with himself. The voices of doubt crept into Sarah's mind, fueled by the childhood memories of her father's tragic demise and the taunting she endured at school. Overwhelmed by a surge of emotion, she couldn't contain herself any longer. Pointing an accusatory finger at Mr. Baxter, she shouted for all to hear, "There's the alien. It's been you all along, right under my nose. You're the one causing all of this chaos, just like you did to my father." The townspeople turned attention to Mr. Baxter, confused and fears etched on her face. Sarah, with Miss Henderson by her side, approaching, desperation in her eyes. "Tell me, how can you all not see it? He's been acting strange, and every time something's happened, he's there." Mr. Baxter, a look of bewilderment on his face, stepped forward to defend himself. "Sarah, please, you have it all wrong. With Mr. Thompson's assistance, we've been working tirelessly to fix the electrical issues and ensuring the town's safety. I may have appeared strange at times due to the pressure, but I'm not an alien, I promise." Sarah's eyes narrowed, her voice filled with frustration. "Pressure? From who? Are you working with someone to disrupt this town, to make me look like a fool?" Mr. Baxter's face flushed with frustration as he defended his actions. "No, Sarah, you have it all wrong. We've been doing everything we can to protect the town. I've been talking to myself because it helps me through complex problems. It's just a habit, nothing more." Tom, sensing the escalating tension, approaches the crowd, trying to reason with them. "You see, friends, accusing Mr. Baxter without evidence won't solve anything. With the help of Mr. Thompson, we have been working to ensure this town's well-being and preventing a situation like what happened on Maple Street. I'm sure Mr. Thompson can confirm Mr. Baxter's story." Sarah's eyes darted between Tom, Mr. Baxter, and Mr. Thompson. Her voice fills with frustration. "What? No. We've witnessed the strange occurrences. How can you just dismiss it all?" Tom, focusing on uniting the town more, turns his attention to the crowd, offering a compassionate perspective. "My friends, We can't search for answers in tabloids or comic books. The answers must be within our community. It's a challenging task, but I believe in our collective strength. There's no alien here, just people trying to make sure you and your families are safe. The townspeople listened, the initial doubt slowly subsiding as Tom's words resonated with them. Sarah felt a mixture of frustration and resignation as she witnessed Tom skillfully dismantle her argument. She watched as he gained the support and trust of the townspeople while her own credibility faltered. Left alone in the fading light, Sarah grappled with the weight of her beliefs and the consequences of her action. She realized she had just lost sight of the bigger picture, allowing her unwavering conviction to overshadow the need for careful consideration of unity. As Tom continued to guide the town people away from the chaotic scene, Sarah was left to reflect on her journey and the path she had taken. The town had shifted, and she knew she had played a part in that. It was a humbling moment, one that forever alters her perception of herself and the power of her beliefs. That night, under the cover of darkness, Tom stood alone in a dimly lit alley. A voice echoing from a radio, a voice that was eerily familiar, yet not quite human. "Is it time?" it asked, the static crackling from the anticipation. Tom responded, his voice steady. "Yes, Steve, it's time." His words hung in the air, a chilling promise of what was to come. As he walked away, his shadow seemed to flicker under the moonlight, hinting at a form not quite human. His silhouette was tall, his movements too smooth, too precise. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life again. "Remember, Tom," the voice said, its tone almost nostalgic. "There's a Maple Street in every city." The voice was unmistakably Steve's, a voice that once echoed through another town, another Maple Street. But it was different now, colder, more distant. Tom paused, a smile playing on his lips. "I remember, Steve," he replied, his voice filled with a quiet confidence. "And soon, they'll remember too." In the quiet town of Acer, the stage was set for a story as old as time. Fear, paranoia, and the unknown were about to unfold, reminding us that there's a Maple Street in every city. The residents of Acer, oblivious to Tom's true identity, were about to experience a reality they had only imagined in their wildest dreams. As for Tom and Steve, their plans was just beginning. Acer was their Maple Street, and there were many more to come. Well, that's it. That is my story. There's a Maple Street in every city, and I got the name from pretty much the last line from the original episode where the aliens were saying that everywhere in pretty much America at that time was Maple Street, right? Fear was everywhere, and they were just going to go from one town to another, one after another, to pretty much let everyone destroy themselves. I thought it'd be a cool idea to carry over this story and maybe borrow some characters. Tom, or Tommy, is actually the kid from the original story. In my opinion, he was an alien from the get-go. In my personal opinion, I just thought he was an alien. He's not an original story, but I think it would have made perfect sense that if he was. I took Steve, who was another main character in that episode, to also help that, and that's who Tom is talking to at the end. And then Sarah, I wanted to kind of entwine her into the whole thing, and so when they're speaking about Sarah's father, if you ever watch the episode where it was, will the real Martian please stand up? Remember, everyone who went across that bridge at the end died, right? And one of the officers was Dan Perry. And the place where it was at was, well, I mean, it states that they were at the Highway Cafe. That was the name of the cafe everyone was at. Lo and behold, if you actually go to Blackfoot territory, you actually will see that there's a Highway Cafe over there. Interesting, right? You will also see that there's a bridge right there as well. So I thought it made sense to kind of build that connection from that route and borrow her a pass that kind of makes her believe more that there is aliens, but she's trying to be the person that is not fazed by it, but she really is. That's why she reads tabloids and things of that nature. But yeah, that was my whole take on the story. There's more, but I hope you guys all liked it. And if you do, just leave a like, subscribe, and hopefully I'll do more of these. Maybe do a whole new channel where it's just focusing on continuing the story of, you know, maybe the Outer Limits or other Twilight Zone episodes that I like, so on and so forth. But again, thank you guys for taking the time to listen. And if you got this far, leave a like and subscribe. Appreciate it. Peace.